Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a fantasy movie review and I'll be having a look at the movie Witchville, also known as HEXEN in some territories. So this is a fantasy movie starring Luke Goss and it's made for TV, made for a sci-fi channel. Okay, so the best way I could describe this film is this. If you can imagine low-budget fantasy films are kind of people, how would you best describe this film? And I would best describe this film as the bimbo of low-budget fantasy films. So what do I mean by that? Well, aesthetically it actually is quite pretty and there's some features that you might kind of find attractive. However, they're kind of fake looking, and when you actually scratch the surface, it's pretty damn dumb on the inside. So that's the best analogy I can give for this film. So it's obviously a made-for-TV film, so it's obviously got a low budget. So let's get that out of the way first and foremost. And the story basically centres around a new king played by Luke Goss, who is basically has to kind of rid his kingdom from the menace of this sort of growing witch population that are destroying the crops and sort of threatening the kingdom. And they set out with a group of heroes where they sort of encounter a group of like Chinese bandits that they kind of band together with to try and sort of defeat this sort of evil witch menace. And that's basically the plot in a nutshell. Like I said, this film aesthetically isn't too bad. So when you sort of first look at it, it's got some very sort of inventive costumes. You know, they've got the weapons, for example, that they're kind of very sort of oversized and sort of elaborate weapons. They do kind of remind me of those sort of fantasy swords that you kind of get from these sort of places that look a little bit too impractical to actually use. And obviously people have got these sort of massively oversized costumes and things like that. So it kind of looks quite good in a kind of for a fantasy film, but maybe a little bit impractical, and I have to say a little bit cheap looking, as I said. And some of the actual shots and the sort of poses that these people pull, posturing for battle and things like that, yeah, it kind of looks pretty good, but it's kind of a little bit dumb. And that's the real criticism here, is this film is just so both dumb and dull, unfortunately. It just doesn't feel very interesting when you're actually watching it as a viewer. It kind of plods along, you're not really invested in any sort of characters. The acting is all very, very cheap, with the exception of possibly Luke Goss. You've got Sarah Douglas as kind of the main witch, who's like massively hamming it up, but all the supporting cast are pretty much forgettable. It's a very lifeless film, and there's just not a lot of substance to it. When you put all these elements into a kind of a low budget film, it just looks silly, which is a shame, as I said, because they're going to set it up to look like it could be an interesting fantasy film. And I also think the title doesn't help. I think it's kind of got a bit of a cheesy title, to be honest with you. And I actually thought it was a horror film rather than a fantasy film when I kind of first saw it. So over and all, it's a bit of a waste of time. Like I said, aesthetically it's okay, and if that's kind of all you're after, then you may get a sort of kick out of it. It's not a particularly gory film, so it may be okay for kids and things like that, or sort of younger people. But overall, this film is just poor, unfortunately. I'll give it a 3 out of 10, and that's the plus points are really only for the aesthetics. So, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.